Good. Again, thanks so much for being with us today. Really do appreciate your guys' interest in what we are doing. Just a little bit of history on where we came from. We had become pretty comfortable in building church in more or less middle-class America. For many years, actually, we've been involved in that. But I probably lost a good bit of the adventure of just following Jesus and replaced it with kind of the predictability of church traditions and systems. So I was pretty surprised at one point. I was in the middle of this experience. We were pastoring this church, and it was going fine. But I received a prophetic word from somebody that I trusted quite a lot. And the word said this. It said, your feet are going to walk on many nations in all the continents. You're going to plant churches and father them and nurture them like a Johnny Appleseed, dropping seeds and watering them. And many will help the vision come to pass. Now, when we heard this, we were like, what? You've got to be kidding me. We couldn't imagine what it would even begin to look like to plant churches like a Johnny Appleseed. You see them just sowing seeds wildly. I mean, we had started one traditional church, and that just about had done us in. So this was a word we really didn't receive at the time, and it made no sense to us. But as God does in his mercy, he did turn my predictable world upside down. He took me through a painful personal train wreck, and then he called me to really let go of all of the blueprints I had been using and really just let him lead me in a fresh way. And so that's what took us into new missionary concepts of simple church and church planting movements and reproducing disciples. Okay, something extra on the screen. Let me get rid of that. So reproducing disciples, simple churches and leaders, that was all new for us. But during this transition, that allowed us to really get a hold of those things. But even so, we didn't know where that would go. Well, as we went through that kind of personal time of transition that God took us through and not knowing really where we were heading, he did take us into some of the more desperate parts of the world. We went first into South America, then Asia, and then on into Africa. It just seemed like he was preparing us for something. This was new for us to travel in these kind of places. We did have to adjust to some of the cultural, Michael, I'm showing a picture of a very basic bathroom, basically. And when we first went the first year, my wife actually enjoyed taking pictures of different facilities that we had to learn how to use. And that was just one small part of kind of the cultural shock we learned to deal with. But we found ourselves traveling in these places. And as that happened, we really began to discover two things, two problems that we saw taking place around the world in missions. One was we weren't seeing poverty being addressed with just handouts. I mean, all over the world there's some great things being done, but a lot of it is a handout mentality. And we really began to see that poverty is caused not just by a lack of resources, but also a lack of spiritual life and mindsets and transformation of the thinking that comes from a spiritual life in Christ. And so we really saw this in many graphic ways. I remember one woman told us, she said, I didn't actually believe it was possible to feed my children here on earth. I believed I would only be able to do that in heaven. And so that was a mindset that kept her trapped in a fatalism and a hopelessness. And that mindset had to be challenged by a gospel that said God is for her. There's hope for you. Your life can change. That's what had to happen for her then to begin to get a hold of and use the few resources that she had to change her life. And so we saw in many cases that poverty at a really deep root level wasn't being addressed. The second thing we were actually surprised to see was that many people actually were not being reached by the gospel. There were churches in many places caught up like they are here in programs and buildings, but not actually reaching and discipling the harvest that's around them. I mean, we saw places with such spiritual hunger, and there were churches caught up with their own programs. There were crusades that were, doing great numbers, but not actually producing really disciples that were growing and reproducing other disciples. And we were pretty surprised by that. And like I said, these are areas where the spiritual hunger was quite great. And so we took the basic principles that God had been showing us in terms of reproducible simple churches and church planting movements, disciple-making movements, and we began to work with them, with leaders in various places. And it seemed like God has connected us more strategically with areas in East Africa. So as we began to train leaders, here's one example. We began working with Stephen. This is back a couple years now. He was pastoring a traditional church in DR Congo. He was doing fine. He had probably 100 members in his church, but he was asking for help because he could see this vast need around him, and he was trying to figure out how he was to reach so many people with his church. So he thought, well, maybe I need to plant more churches, and so he was looking for help. And so we began to work with him in a completely different strategy, working with church planting movement type of principles that moved out of the traditional building and into the neighborhoods and regions and areas with just simple principles of reaching people, discipling them, and then teaching them to disciple and reach others and start simple gatherings where they are. And you can see the result of within a couple years for him, for example, he began to develop many active church planters, first in 9 different regions, and then each of those began to develop a team of active church planters under them, and it just began to multiply. So we've had the benefit now of seeing this happen in a number of places. But the result of this kind of thing, I mean, I'm kind of giving you the technical side of it, but it does result in the real change of real lives. Stephen loves to tell the stories of blind people leading churches in their home. This is people we've been in their home in a village in Congo, learning to pray together, encouraging one another, and actually reaching out to others from their home. In that region, we've seen Muslims opening their houses to be a place of worship and learning Jesus' word together, and then being able to share that with others and disciple others from their home and begin to reach out to others in their homes as well. Widows who've lost their family, stripped of everything. They come to Christ, find a new life, and they open up their home and began to reach people, disciple them, and teach them to reach and disciple others. And so these are real life people that we have met, we've been around, and we're seeing real fruit in their lives as they reach out to others. And so it's real stories, real life stories, of course, of real people whose lives are being changed by the impact of church planting movement principles, disciple-making movement principles. So we've been blessed to see a number of leaders develop like Stephen. We are currently seeing key leaders involved in Kenya and Tanzania, in Rwanda, in Burundi, and we have a committed leadership team in Uganda as well, which is what we're focusing on right now. So we believe that right now Uganda is a window of opportunity, and it really is a time in which that we can see a lot of teams emerging. I've got this pop-up on my screen. I'm going to try to deal with it differently and see if that helps sitting. Well, it sort of messed me up, my screen thing. Just give me a moment here. Let's see if resume slideshow works. Okay, I think we're back on. So we're focusing on Uganda. A couple of reasons for that. First of all, there really is a tremendous, as throughout Africa, there's a tremendous spiritual hunger in this nation. And even from those who have been proselytized into Islam, they describe a tremendous hopelessness because there is no hope offered to them, whether it's from animism, their religion of superstitions that they've grown up with, or Islam that says you have to work towards something. They feel very hopeless. As one gal said, Islam just made me feel hopeless. And then, of course, poverty also leads to desperation, just a greater hunger for spiritual things. And in these regions, Uganda in particular, there's a tremendous increasing Muslim presence that's encroaching from the north as they move very intentionally in trying to proselytize that nation. So we feel it's a really, really critical time in this country right now. And then on top of that, we do have the beginnings of a very committed leadership and a growing team. This has just been developing over the last year or so. I've got a picture on the screen of Henry Wando and his wife Dorcas, and his diagram as they have begun reaching leaders in various regions throughout Uganda. And they have really started a great work. But what we want to do is see that work tremendously accelerated. Because it's such a good foundation, because it's a spiritually hungry place, we feel that by coming under them and supporting them with more resources, it won't create a dependency when we do it well, but it will accelerate the movement forward over the next few years. And so here's what we can bring to teams like this in Uganda. We're able to help them afford more training, and I'll talk just a bit more about each of these, more coaching, better technology so they can communicate with one another, economic development, which is key to sustain the leaders because they're all supported through their own business or enterprises or farms. And then we want to provide resources, materials, and Bibles to support the harvest. So what we've discovered, now we've been doing this for about a year now, where we have invited people to join us in providing more resources to an existing movement. And so a year ago, this was kind of theory. We thought, well, let's see what happens. Can we really accelerate a movement with a few resources? The movement's not dependent on the resources. The resources can go away. The movement will continue. But what will happen if we can support the movement with a little bit of resources? And what we've seen is these very capable leaders can truly take this movement to a new level quicker with a good partnership with a few resources that we're able to provide for them. So what do we actually provide for them? Let's see. Let me back this up. Sorry, guys. Let me first mention what does it cost? What we're looking for to support this national movement in Uganda, we're looking for a total. We'd like to get to a total of about $500 a month. So we've broken that up by region just as a way to make that bite size so that individuals can get involved for, say, $50 a month, or a group could get involved for $50 a month, or take a region or two, or more or less, whatever. The point is to break it up so that we're able to, in partnership together, raise enough to really bring this movement to the next level. So we kind of made $50 a month kind of a benchmark, something that's hopefully bite-sized that people can get involved in. There's happens to be 10 key regions in Uganda, and so that's just a way to look at this particular effort in working together to see the movement go forward. So what do we actually provide with that money? Just to go into this a little bit more in depth, what we provide, first of all, is so important. We provide transportation and conference expenses for regional and national trainings. So what happens is we develop and have developed a pretty good core group of trainers there in Uganda, a few of them, including Henry. They're very capable on their own. But in order to really see the movement go forward, the training they're able to do needs to take place in every region on an ongoing basis. And so the cost for that is quite prohibitive for them to keep it up on a regular monthly basis. But for a little bit of money, we're able to support them so that they can regularly travel to the different areas, bring the leaders in that region together, and increase the training that's going on for them. Second thing that we're able to do is provide materials and Bibles for the training and also for new believers. And obviously that really does help accelerate. Again, this is something they can provide, but we're able to move that forward in a greater way. They'd be able to provide on a limited basis. We're able to accelerate that by providing more of those kind of resources. Third thing we're able to do is help them with technology. I've got a picture up, Michael, of a couple of guys on their cell phones. These guys and their cell phones, that's like you and your laptop, basically. I mean, this is their computer. It's a very inexpensive and important technology in their country, and it really allows them to communicate with each other, and in our case, to provide ongoing coaching and connection between the leaders and those that they're working with. So being able to equip them with technology, basic technology that suits them is very, very helpful and really moves the movement forward. And finally, we want to see these leaders self-supporting themselves. And what we've discovered at this point is that it's farming and animal husbandry that serves the best in terms of giving them something that they can get a hold of and that they can continue to develop on their own, and that can provide income for themselves and other key church planting families. None of our church planters receive salaries. There's none of that. They're self-supporting, and that way the movement is able to go forward. But when we can come alongside and help them begin projects for themselves and the families of other key church planters, it really does accelerate the movement, and it is a tremendous help. So the result of this, as I've already mentioned, is real lives being changed, and that's really what it's all about when all is said and done. As one person said, he said, I was broken, my life had no hope, my family had deserted me because of my problems, but Christ now has made me new. And, you know, seeing that kind of everyday miracle, of course, that's what we all love to see in the lives of people. And in these kind of areas where we are able to see people step out of maybe traditional structures that have hindered the movement of the gospel and see the gospel set free, the result is people's lives are changed and transformed, and Christ really is made new in their lives. So that's basically it. Obviously, possible responses is to get involved and sponsor one or more regions, or to say no thanks. And you know, I just put this up there because God leads all of us in different directions, and we don't want anybody to feel like there's we don't want anybody to feel like our relationship with you has to do with how you respond to this kind of thing. We just want to fill you in and make sure that you understand what it is that we're doing and why we're inviting people to partner with us. So let me take a moment here and show myself back up. I'll put my face back up here, and I'm going to unmute everybody. That's my presentation, you guys. I appreciate you just kind of having to sit back and listen to that. It's kind of the easiest way to do it. So any questions? Let's see. Before I take questions, I'm going to invite my wife, Brooks, to also speak her perspective on what I've just shared. So, Brooks, if you wouldn't mind.
First of all, I just love being with you guys. Roger meets, I guess, to interact with many people in different regions of the U.S. and all over the world, and I don't have that opportunity so much. So it's great to meet folks like Don talked about, like-minded people. So It's very inspiring, and sometimes I know that all of us can sometimes feel very alone and disconnected from the body of Christ. So it's really, really great to have this time just to be together. I guess I just would like to tack on to what Roger has said, just how we just feel like it's such an opportunity to the people that we meet, and they're young, they're passionate, they're willing to sacrifice whatever it takes to spread the gospel. And so it's really hard not to come back and just want to do everything we can to facilitate them, because when we train them or come alongside of them, they take our suggestions and they actually go do it. They want to make disciples. Their culture is very, very relational. And so to teach them just basic discipleship as opposed to building another church and doing a system like that, they are all over that. They really want to do that. The people are receptive. They're open, especially when you go to them and one neighbor goes to another neighbor and shows any kind of care or concern for them on a real level, really showing the love of Christ. They are very, very open and receptive to the gospel, especially on this kind of one-to-one level as opposed to come to my church. So what we see with these leaders is that they are multiplying because they see how simple it is, that they don't need a ton of money to do it. But what they do need is they need our support in getting them their own self-sustainable to have income for their family, because we really do believe that church starts at home, and that means the husband taking responsibility to come alongside and provide for the children and for the wife, and to help at home and really practice being Jesus to his family first, and then going out and spreading the gospel. And so that's just one way that we can help facilitate that, as well as all the other ways that Roger talked about, transportation and materials and things that they need. So I feel like, lots of times in my neighborhood, I don't know about yours, but in mine, people don't seem very hungry for anything that I might have to offer them. But over there, people are open and they are hungry, and it's you can really sense that there's a real openness right here, right now. And so anything we can do to help these nationals facilitate what the Holy Spirit's doing there is just very, very exciting. So I do appreciate being with you tonight, and love having the chance just to share our hearts with you.
Great. Thank you, Brooks. Appreciate that. Michael, I see you've joined us live, and my little visual's all finished. Sorry, brother. Don't know what to tell you, but glad you joined us. You can hear us still, Michael?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And you sound closer to home. That's great. Comments, questions? We've done the talking. We're happy to listen here, or if, yeah, just happy to listen. If you guys have anything you'd like to say, do, sing a song, ask something about us.
CT wrote a question there.
Oh, sorry. Thanks so much. Are these church planters doing church planting full time? Yes and no. They, you know, it's so different there from the standpoint of they have such a kingdom perspective that they see this as their priority in terms of what they're doing. They are, of course, supporting their family, so they're not being paid full-time. And so they do have enterprises that they use to support their family. But it's amazing, at least to us, how much time, nevertheless, they're able to invest in their ministry and in their work, and what a priority they make. In fact, there's times in which we have to encourage them to don't neglect the family for the sake of the ministry. We've got to really encourage them to keep a balance there. So they're full-time in heart. They're not paid full-time because really the movement depends on self-sustaining workers that can reproduce themselves without the need for outside support or dependency. Did I answer your question, Carmen? I'm watching you now. Yes. Okay. Great. Anybody else? Anything else?